Okay, I think we'll go ahead and begin. The Ozark Mountains are a wonderful place to visit and enjoy and experience. I had the privilege of living there for a little over 11 years of my life. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. And because of our years there, when we moved away 9 years ago, I left 2 of my children there and 6 grandchildren. So it's a place that we frequent quite a bit. And we go there sometimes as a whole family. My wife and I travel back from time to time just to visit those that remain, but I have other children and grandchildren too. Well, one year we were going to meet there, and I was aware that since we had left Arkansas, something new was built that I wanted to see and show my sons. So when the last of our group arrived and went to the airport to pick them up, I told one of my sons that was driving, I said, I want to show y'all something. And it was about 3 miles off our scheduled route. And I just wanted them to see this clubhouse back at Payne Valley. It's in Branson, Missouri, designed by Tiger Woods. He helped design it. And it wasn't as much that Tiger Woods designed it. I was impressed with that clubhouse, and I wanted to show it to them, what it looked like from the road. This was a street view. Well, to the person, I'm not going to expose who it was, that was driving the vehicle, he's a little bit like Dad, and is impulsive. This view wasn't good enough. And he said, we want to see it up close. And he went over to the left, and we wound our way up there, and we went through what we should have recognized was a main parking lot. And by the way, the vehicle we were driving, full of adults and children, and an older style beat-up minivan did not fit in with what I was seeing in the parking lot. And that wasn't good enough. We weren't seeing the clubhouse yet. So we kept going, and we kept going, and we started passing groups of people that started grinning when we met them. And I started sliding down in my seat. I did not want to be here. I was just sure something wasn't right. And sure enough, we came up, well, we did see the clubhouse, and there was a little wooden bridge that was made for golf carts, and we were on a golf cart path. And now we had to go in reverse by all those grinning people. The point of this is, if we're not careful, we can wind up being at a place we don't want to be and not know it until we're there. And it's not fun to be in a place we don't want to be. My name is Ken Nisly. I work for Game and Business Advisors. I'll give you a little of my background. I was in construction for 20 years, and I had an extreme change of occupation. I got into healthcare for about 10 and a half years. Those were my years that were in Arkansas at a nursing home as director of a nursing home. And December will be 9 years that I've been working in this capacity as an advisor. And there's some days that I am totally convinced that I'm living out my childhood dream. And that was, I had a dream of being a detective, and that's what I feel like I get to do with the clients that I work with, and being a detective with numbers and figure out what's wrong. If something's not right in a business, if they want to do something different, it's fun to get in there and find out what the problem is. So I enjoy my job as a business detective. Today we're going to discuss the subject of job costing and profitability, but I want you to leave here knowing these things, is that if you're a positive thinker and you do estimating, you're probably going to struggle with profitability. And we're going to explore the subject of job costing, what it involves, how to do it correctly, and how doing that changes your profitability. So I want to jump into this subject first of all, and the reason I feel really free to say the things I'm going to say about it, because I was one of those people. I walk into a business, the first thing I look for usually is what I like about it. That's just how I'm geared. I like to think that I'm a positive thinker, and I discovered along in evaluating myself and some of the estimators I've had the privilege of working with, that if we call ourselves positive thinkers, we probably are not so good, especially in our estimating as it relates to time. I know of a situation where there's 2 partners in a business, and the one is classified as positive, the other would be classified as more negative. And one of the employees made this statement: when we go out on an on-site build, if the positive thinker tells us you'll be done in 5 hours, almost always it's 7 or 8. But if the negative partner says how long it'll be, he nails it right on top, right on. So it's just something that I picked up on, see where I've made a lot of mistakes myself. So that's something you want to be aware of. Other things of like if you're doing the estimating on extras on your sheds would be another place that will probably surface when we get into the subject of job costing, that you may be probably think that it takes less time than what it actually does. So if you're one of those people, identify your weakness and apply that when you go into those jobs and start evaluating them. What will happen over time, if you focus on those jobs, you'll see that you need to make some adjustment in how you think about those jobs. I'd like to ask you a question, and it's probably a joke to even put it up here, but is profitability important to you? And I would like to suggest that there's about 4 reasons why profitability is very important in the business. And for starters, even we have examples in Scripture. Jesus told the story of the man, the owner of a business that passed out the talents. And there is one person in there that has a tagline attached to him ever since. He's known as the unprofitable steward. If we want to be good stewards of our business, we're going to want to have profitability to do the following things. If you want to grow and stay sustainable, you have to have profitability. You're going to have to replace your equipment. Number 2, if you want to be known as a giver, it's hard to give when you don't have anything. So profitability even affects our giving. And the third one was the subject that John covered this morning, is that if we want to take good care of our employees, we need to be profitable. In the years over COVID and since COVID, I've noticed a stark difference in companies that are profitable in the way they are paying attention to taking good care of their employees. And when you have owners that they know their employees are going by signs out there, starting wage $28, $30 an hour, and you get to drive a forklift, and it's in a warehouse, those things work on you because maybe what you're doing doesn't look so nice. But those things affect us, and if we're profitable, we can take good care of our employees. And I'm very passionate about taking care of our employees. I'd like to address a little bit what we as advisors do. I often get asked the question, Ken, what in the world do y'all even do when you work with companies? And one of the first things that I will tell you is that it's pretty normal for us to maybe hear things like this. In 2021, we did okay. We had some profit. In 22, we don't even know what happened, but all at once there's no numbers. There's no profit, and can you help us get to where we're at 10% or beyond? That would be pretty normal of things that we hear. And we like to go inside of that and figure out what exactly has happened, or what is happening, what can we do to help change this company. Or maybe your numbers look like this to you. That's something else that we run into, and it's not the end of the world if it does. We can help it. We want to help you get as quick as possible. We want to help you get to where your numbers do make sense to you, because once you understand exactly where you're at, it will change how you make decisions, and you'll become confident. You'll become a confident decision maker. We're going to use this as an example this morning as I run through this, and the first thing I want to say is if there's anybody here that knows of a company like this, it's not that one. I made this up. I Googled it. I couldn't find any name like that here in the States. I think there is one somewhere in the world, but I chose this name so you don't know this company. Everything about this example is fictitious. So my question would be, if you would be asked, what is wrong with this company? What do we need to do to change that bottom line to where it's an acceptable profit? I'm curious what your answer would be. And one thing that I will say that we hear a lot is that it's pretty standard that a company like this would think the answer is we have to get more sales. We just have to get more sales. Is that the real issue here? There's a slogan I like to use. The way to fix the bottom line is to fix what's wrong at the top first. And I ask again, Should we increase sales? Do we need to lower overhead? Do they have a lower head issue? Or should they just go out of business? And before I address it, I'd like to say something that I learned from this man, Jack Welch. He was the man that ran General Electric for 20 years, and he had 3 little simple rules that he lived by, and he changed GE with these 3 rules. He just simply said, whatever we make, is we're going to fix it, we're going to cut it, or we're going to sell it. It's that simple. And if you think about that, that doesn't sound like a big to-do list. It does require time and it takes concentration, but there's probably things inside your company that you need to take a look at. And I'll tell you why here shortly. So what did he mean by fix? If fixing it for Jack meant change the pricing. If it's not profitable for us, let's change the pricing to where that product will be profitable. If we can't do anything about it, let's just quit making it, or maybe we can sell this product line to somebody else. Those were the 3. That was what Jack lived by. 20 years later, he took GE from a company that was worth $14 billion to $410 in 20 years' time by practicing those 3 rules. So I asked again, what do we need to do with this company? So clue number 1, and probably some of you caught it, that there's a line here that jumps out at me that tells me this company we need to go in and do what we call job costing. Look at what each individual product they're doing. What is it doing for the company? That's what job costing is. So that's my first clue, is I don't like that cost of goods percentage. That's too high, and it tells me that they have a pricing problem. So that's just a rule. If it's over 50%, and in the shed industry, it's going to be lower than that, but in manufacturing, that's a kind of a rule that we follow. It's our first indicator that there's something wrong. So let's look at what we can do for Progressive Storage Solutions and see what's wrong with their pricing. We're going to do it by job costing. And what job costing is simply fairly applying every penny of your overhead to everything that you make. Every product has to carry its share of the burden. I want to use the example. Last fall, I did something I never did before, and I ran my first Spartan. And I was nervous because I had never done that before. I had worked several months to get in shape I thought I was in shape to go do it. And what it is it's an obstacle course. That day we were given 21 obstacles that we had to get through. It's a test of physical endurance, and it tests you. It took me to the edge. But interestingly, something that caught my attention, they were releasing, I would say it was probably 50 of us every 5 minutes. And in my group, there was a group of veterans that they worked to the front. And these guys had muscles in places that I didn't even have places. I mean, they were ripped. But they were there that day for a different reason than just to endure the Spartan for themselves. They had a fellow veteran that only had one arm, and they were going to help him go through all those obstacles. But on top of that, they said, it was announced, the announcer was saying, they are also carrying a 40-pound concrete block with them. Through that whole thing, besides helping their buddy, they're going to carry this concrete block with them. It was 8 of them, to show that we help each other carry our burdens. That's really cool that they did that, but it's the same way in your products that you make. Everything you make has to carry its share of your burdens. And when we say overhead, what we want you to know is that it truly is your overhead. And what I want to address this right up front. There's different ways that companies and softwares, what they call overhead. It's probably pretty normal in your software. They're going to probably want to lump payroll and your cost of goods. For us, cost of goods is just the raw material. They're going to lump that together. We don't do that. We separate it out, and there's a reason for it. Cost of goods, if it's clean cost of goods, you can track it instantly watching your percentages. If that thing starts climbing, you can know you're not passing on the cost of that to your customer. So we insist that's clean. So we put payroll, no matter how you pay. John addressed this morning different ways you can compensate your employees. We're going to put that down in payroll, no matter if it's by the hour, percentages or however you're doing. We're going to put that there for starters. For us, the way we look at payroll, and we use this format for every company we work with. It doesn't matter if it's a shed industry, construction, retail, what it is. We use the same format for every company we work with. So in this discussion this morning, overhead starts at payroll. Then we have variable expenses and fixed expenses, which I'll explain on the next slide. The debt of the company. I put the owner's draw in 100,000. Now you have your total overhead. Whatever you make has to have its share of that $1.5 million down there. For those who are wondering, what we call variable expense is the items listed on here, the first two graphs on the left. And it's much more. I see anything across the chart. It's kind of your catch-all account. It's things that, it's the opposite of fixed. Fixed, you kind of have, if you have a real estate lease, you have your utilities, things that are just pretty much repeat themselves every month, goes under fixed. The rest is anything from advertising to office supplies. It's just what you're going to run into periodically. Your list may be much shorter or much longer than that. That's what we call variable. And I would also like to address that there's two ways you could address this subject this morning. The first one is taking that overhead burden and applying it to the sales of your product. We choose to do it a different way, and we like to look at the overhead as it relates to your gross profit margin. And the reason for that, we have come across situations where when you apply it by sales, it doesn't do it fairly as you weigh out your products or whatever it is you're manufacturing, your sheds. So if you simply take it and figure out what is the overhead as it relates to my gross profit margin, we're going to use that same thing then as we get into job costing to look. We're going to apply the overhead that we have to the gross product margin of your product. And I'm going to make a point here. Remember this as I go into here, and I have a chart up here that you're welcome to come up. It's going to be in our booth as well. This is what we call our job coster, and it captures every penny of your company, and it captures every penny that goes into your building, and it spits it out at the end, either by percentage of profit, and right behind it, I also added another one, what it's doing for your company by the hour. And the reason for that is for some people, they like percentages and some people like dollars, so I have them both there. You're welcome to look at it. But I also, because of the way we're doing this, in the subject of job costing, notice now that payroll really changed here. And that's because I pulled out your build labor, and that's going to be in a column by itself on the job coster, because we're tracking that as an item by itself. It's on the overall overhead of the company, it was all together, it was over 800,000. But I pulled it out now, and now that's going to be addressed up top. We have your build labor, which in this company was 10%, that's what they allowed. And then you have your overhead of the gross profit margin came to 51%, and you have other cost of goods, which are also applying to your sheds as a percentage, because we know inside of that, if you're subbing anything out, or if you have like deliveries in there, that type of thing, and other cost of goods. It's a direct expense of the shed, but it's not raw material. Those are the three areas now that we're plugging into our job coster to show you how much overhead you have in that product. And we get to the spreadsheet itself of the jobs, and here again, don't pay attention to the pricing. It doesn't mean anything. This is all fictitious. It's for this presentation. So you have your, first of all, you have your type of shed, you have your pricing that you have currently, cost of goods or your raw material, and then your other cost of goods is pulling in as a percentage. And then we get to the gross profit. Right behind that, we're plugging in your build labor, the hours that it took to manufacture it. That's very important. You want to know that as an owner. How long does it take my guys to build this shed? And then last of all comes that overhead. And this is probably a category that we see people stumble with quite a bit, of how to truly apply my overhead to my product. And that's what we're doing here now. With the overhead, this is the overhead of the company, which was 51% of the gross profit. Now we're putting that to the gross profit of your individual job. And the other thing I want to pause here and make this comment. The correct way you want to do this is take the overhead of a whole year. Do not change this percentage every month. That's going to be all across the chart. Go a whole year, 6 months later, come back in and check it. And the other thing that I will do for a company is when we're budgeting for the year, if they're telling me, hey, we know that we spent $40,000 in advertising this year, but this year it's going to go up to 20, I'll just go ahead and plug that in right away on top of what last year did. But make those adjustments, or if you had something last year that was an unusual expense, a one-time thing, you can pull that out. But plug in a whole year's worth of numbers, and then what I do after that, I'm just constantly watching my gross profit margin. Is it holding in the company? And then also the percent of overhead, is it changing? And if something's happening all at once, there's a radical change, I'll go in and change it. But most times in my normal companies, I plug this number in January, and we check it again in July, just to see if there's any change on either one of those. And then the next line would be your total expense for that barn or shed, the profit that's left in it, the percent of profit, and then also what it did for you by the hour. And here again, for some reason, for most of my guys, when I do this for them, that last column is what gets their attention, more than the percentage for some reason. They'll ask the question, well, why can I make $37 an hour, and you're telling me down here I have a product that's giving me 99 cents an hour? Well, that just doesn't work. But what normally tends to happen in most companies we work with, I would say probably 70% of what they're making is okay, but they're struggling with the other 30% and don't know it, that it's that bad. In year one, I'll give you an example. In year one, if 70% of what they're doing comes from the good part, they probably have an average profit. But what happens if all at once your sales start coming from the products that are not doing so good for you, and that starts growing? That company can be booked out just as far. They can be working just as hard, selling maybe even more, and where's the money? They just don't have cash. All at once cash flow stops, and they have no idea why. And in Progressive Storage Solutions, the problem here was that they were making a lot of economy sheds that were not priced correctly. And they were also had lots that were wanting to buy sheds from them, and they were trying to work a deal out for them that was a wholesale price. You need to be very careful with this. The thing I like to make a big deal out of is that you and your guys work just as hard to build that shed, no matter how you sell it. So be careful when you adjust your wholesale pricing from retail, that there's enough left in it for you. I would run into that one quite a bit. So I think we know the answer here. Anything that was under 10%, I tagged as yellow for caution, and if it's under 5% or worse, I made that red so it jumps out. I don't know if you can see it from the back, but you're welcome to come up afterwards or to our booth. This chart will be there for you to look at as well. So what happened? By doing that, we got in Progressive Storage Solutions, we got their cost of goods down to 44.5%, and I understand there's some that would be a whole lot lower than that. Probably pre-COVID, that would have been kind of a target to get to, but that has changed because pricing increased and cost of goods have come down now. We fixed their pricing, and that put your sales up, but look what happened on the bottom line. A drastic change just because they fixed what was wrong at the top. Because I just put this in here again to note that because of what we learned from job costing, we changed what was wrong at the top and changed the bottom line by $850,000. And I have another point to make here. Let me come back to this. If I can go reverse here. Notice something here with me. What changed in the before and after? Only two lines changed. And that is the top line and the bottom line. Cost of goods didn't change, overhead didn't change by $1. So that I come back to this, was the answer getting more sales? If you would have got more sales, you'd have made your bottom line worse because your pricing wasn't fixed. For this company, changing their pricing meant that they had this radical change without selling one more shed, just because they fixed their pricing. I'm going to open it up for a question and answer time. I have something at the end here yet, but I think we'll shift here. And James, if you want to pass the mic around. I was asked too that if you would, wait to begin speaking till you have the mic.
Questions?
Got one up here, James.
What are some good ways to track the hours and the labor per building?
Time. It takes time. That's the problem I usually run into. Everybody's so busy. I want them to do a study. You just have to. You have to take that shed and track every penny, everything you're putting into it, every piece of lumber, every shingle or piece of tin, and then also get the guys that are doing to have a clipboard there. For this, we're doing a study today on the 10 by 16 and have them very carefully track their labor that goes into it. And I realize the other thing you run into, we run into this at times, we go back and double check something, maybe a different crew did it. Personal efficiency is huge, and if that could change, but I think overall you'll have people generally know is this kind of, how we normally would, the hours it would take, and if nothing else, pad it a little. I would say add a little bit on there if you need to, just to make sure you covered it. But it just takes totally focusing. Say we're just going to do it. We're going to go through our products. And what I tell people to do, it can look daunting to think of job costing everything you do, but just start with your best sellers and work your way down. Thank you.
I know you said once you get to 50%, things are getting kind of hairy with the cost of goods. Is there a percentage that is a goal to shoot for?
Maybe we should let the crowd answer that. Yeah, I'm seeing a range of 38 to 44 currently. It's a range. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah.
And it's going to be affected by what region you're in. There's so many things that affect that, but that's the range that I'm seeing currently in the shed industry. Anyone else? Over there, James.
So if you want to grow, be a giver, and take care of your employees, what's a general profit margin, percentage-wise, to shoot for?
For sharing?
Yeah, to be able to grow, to be a giver.
You say what level of profit?
Yeah, 20%, 25, 30.
I feel like in your industry here, it probably tends to be a little higher than some of the companies we work with, some other industries. But often, if this is how I like to describe it, is that it would be pretty normal for us to see in some industries a profit. Maybe they're from 3 to 5%, and they feel stuck there. So to them, it would look like unbelievable change if we could get them to 10%. But it doesn't need to end there. So to answer that question, I would say the range probably should be between 10 and 20, but I've even seen higher than 20. But it's probably somewhere other than a person is currently. But I would say to be able to, your question was to be able to grow. I think it would be hard to do that in probably the way you want to, under 10%, and take good care of your employees.
Obviously, you landed on the cost of goods or the gross profit to split out or carry your overhead. Mm-hmm. What made you land on that versus manufactured hours, let's say?
Probably more than anything is because we have a range of companies we work with, and I think I've only in the last 5 years ever had a situation where I didn't like what it was showing with gross profit margin, and I had to go back to sales. But since we started with using the gross profit margin, I would say 99.9% of anything we do, whether it's your industry here or other types of manufacturing, construction, whatever, it's just across the board, we prefer to apply it to gross profit margin. There are situations that just simply, you won't like how it looks if you apply it to sales. Now, after you fix your pricing, maybe it would be okay then, but especially before it's fixed, before you fix your pricing, I think it'll probably surface quicker if you go with gross profit margin.
What do you see as a comfortable percentage margin for labor of gross profit versus, what it should be for profitability?
That one there, I don't usually put that in as a percentage. Now, now on the flip side, are you saying that the owner should pay for?
No, I'm talking about manufactured labor. What's that good percentage mark, or what's the good percentage number for labor versus your cost of goods sold for your expense?
As it relates to retail, I would say the range is 8 to 10% of what was usually what we would see. I'm not sure about as it relates to cost of goods.
You had the manufacturing costing as a part of your cost of goods sold, right?
No, for the cost of goods sold here was just simply raw material.
Right, but you had a different line for it.
Yeah,
I was just wondering
that's
what that
right.
percentage was that's comfortable.
Yeah. No, that would be against retail sales. And I know especially over COVID, some owners had to lock in their build cost because cost of goods went through the roof. And if you'd have tracked that all the way through with retail sales, that it wouldn't have been fair at all.
In determining how much material you have in any particular building, of course, those menus that you got in QuickBooks, how do you suggest that a small manufacturer come up with a cost of material in each building manually rather than some sophisticated inventory accounting system?
It's usually done by hand for us. It's simply going out and doing a study on the building. And my pushback on that is, so I was in the construction industry, and in that industry, everybody wants a magic number 2 for cost of goods or by the square foot. But there's so many things inside of that change that number that you still have to sit down and do a takeoff. And that's what I say about the shed you build. I don't really care if you're building 100 of this model a year. We need to take the time to figure out what it's costing you. How can you give the correct pricing if you don't know what it's costing you? Whether it's your raw material, your labor, or your overhead. And that's the other thing I wanted to make a big deal of. There is nobody here today with the same amount of overhead. There's no such thing. Every company has a different amount of overhead. It's unique to your company, and you need to apply your overhead to your product. Don't worry about what other people's overhead is. Yours is different than theirs. Just know that it is. I've never seen a company that has the same amount of overhead. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. First of all, let's put my clicker here. I'm going to ask a question that I'm not going to answer. And you're welcome to stop by our booth to discuss it with myself or one of the other advisors that will be there. Should you go by your competition's pricing? I want you to take that and chew over it. I said something in this presentation that should be a pretty key indicator about that question, but think about it and come discuss it with us. So I'd like to say this in closing. If your numbers look like this to you, or it feels that way to you, you don't know where you're at, and you don't like your profit, I highly recommend that you job cost, and if you don't know how to do it, we would be glad to help you with that. Thank you. You all have a wonderful show. God bless.